Sundays have always been sacred to me. It gives me a chance to spend time with my family, with my friends, to focus on my faith. And honestly, We Rest on Sundays is a platform that I've created to help you navigate the complexities of the world. I want to spend time having open, honest dialogue with mentors, friends and family, and individuals that I truly believe are exceptional. We're going to focus on love, career, marriage, parenting, and everything in between. And the primary goal here is for us to become the better versions of ourselves every single day. I want to thank you for tuning in. I'll see you on Sunday.
Dave, I appreciate you being here with me, man. I want to just kick us off with something that I actually wrote for you, and then we'll jump into a few questions and hear more about your story. So Dave, I want to thank you for being here and for being the man that you are. You're an inspiration for those that are around you. You are always authentically yourself. It has been a semi-running joke for our line to call you Super Dave. And that's because you are a man of integrity, high morals, and high character who is always leading by example and by serving the community with your authentic self. Thank you for genuinely stepping into teaching and for leading the youth. You are a man who has continued to have high character. You've led charter schools, you've started charter schools, and you've served in a plethora of different leadership roles within schools. This is exceptional. You have also dealt with challenges, including the loss of your mother, and over the years, you have persevered to stay steadfast in your life progression. I love you, and thank you again for being here with me today.
Thank you.
My pleasure, man. So who is Dave Hardin?
Who is Dave Hardin? Let's see. I think there's a lot of ways to answer that question. I was actually with my family. It's just Thanksgiving break, and my son was with me, and my dad. And my son's name is David Hardin. My dad's name is David Hardin. But actually going back, my granddad was born in 1926. His name was David Hardin.
Wow.
His father, born in 1899, David Hardin, back to 1856. Firstborn male in slavery, where we can keep the records. So literally the progenitor of my family lineage starts with David Hardin. I didn't know that until my mid-20s. But I think in the Bible they talk about generational blessings, and I think that David Hardin is someone who God has looked out for hundreds of years, and I'm just the continuance of that legacy.
That's amazing, man. And it's funny, man. I've been knowing you for 18 years at this point, and I didn't know that about your lineage, man. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's exceptional, man, and it's super, super powerful. I mean, I don't want to make this about myself, but as you know, I named my son Benjamin III, and Indy and I, we went back and forth on that many, many times, and I'm happy that we landed on that, because I hope one day, decades and years down the road, that somebody is able to sit in a seat like this and share that story as well. So thanks for sharing that, man. It's super powerful, Dave. Can you share just some of your formative experiences from Morehouse that shaped you and the man that you are today?
Sure. Morehouse was amazing. I think it was amazing for you too. I'm the first person in my family to go to college, and so that was a big deal. I'd say what drew me to Morehouse first and foremost was just the sense of brotherhood that was there. I had a mentor. I did this fellowship called the W. Du Bois Fellowship, which took high achieving African American students in the Atlanta area and exposed them to so many different things. And I had a mentor, actually Shannon Joyner, and Ty Leverett from Morehouse,
our pro fight,
one of our pro fights, who showed me Morehouse, and I had never seen just a consortium of black men who loved on each other, that were so well spoken, and the lure there was just amazing. And so I'd say one of the fundamental principles that I learned was the et facta est lux, which is and then there was light, and for you to be a candle or a light in the community. And it's one thing to be successful, but I think true success is when you're able to translate that and help other people be successful. And so I think that was one of the principles that really stuck with me and that I try to adhere to this day. Besides that, the sense of brotherhood and living in community and having real people such as yourself that you're connected to and that you're in community with is another big lesson. And I'd say Morehouse really set us up, I think, for success in the future.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you anymore, man. It was by far the best decision I feel like I've ever made in my entire life. It was the first time that I feel like I've been put in social settings and circles with other black boys that looked like me, that spoke like me, that carried themselves like me, that challenged themselves and wanted just more out of life. And it was exceptional, man. But let's talk more about like how did fraternity serve you and how did that impact your life, both professionally and personally?
So we're both members of Alpha Phi Alpha, and very similarly, I'd say that Morehouse is like one big fraternity,
yeah.
And then I'd say whichever fraternity you choose, it's just like a sub-fraternity within that big fraternity. And going in through the process of being an Alpha, I think taught us many things. The first thing I'd say is that you have to really grind for whatever it is that you want. Mm-hmm. And it was not easy at the time in the process of pursuing being an Alpha, and I think really using your connections, using your resources, and steadfastly pursuing something was something that has translated to the future, because in the process you really have to be, I'd say, resourceful in and how you become an Alpha, and those lessons and just the grind of working hard, waking up early, staying late, those things have still translated to this day. The brotherhood, the connection that we have with our line, with other lines, it's so much love when you go to homecoming and just beyond. I was just in Birmingham. The mayor of Birmingham is an Alpha, and we just showed each other love even afterwards because we've all had that similar process. And so those things have been amazing and lifelong lessons for me.
Yeah, man. It's so crazy, Dave, because it's like hearing you speak more and more about like Alpha and Morehouse being a fraternity, like it just sends chills up my body because it's exceptional. Like that opportunity, I try to tell people all the time is there's nothing like the HBCU experience. Like it is truly a blessing and a gift. And I don't think I've ever felt more safe in my life than when I was at Morehouse College, because again, it was like-minded people. Even, the small nuances of not agreeing with somebody was irrelevant, because it's like we're all in this together and we're trying to make it without our parents. We're trying to make it if we don't have parents. We're just trying to make it in America in general.
Yep.
So I appreciate you sharing that, man, because I think, I have younger cousins and, younger mentees that I spend time with that I just try to encourage and hopefully influence to go in that direction, and also consider, a fraternity or sorority as well, because you were able to build these lifelong bonds and brotherhoods and sisterhoods that are beyond meaningful and impactful, when you're traversing through life. So I appreciate you sharing that, Dave. So I know you were, exceptionally close with your mom, and I know that she's also exceptionally proud of you, man, and the man that you have been able to come. Can you just share more about navigating, your life after losing her due to cancer, and what really helped you heal?
Ooh, that's a great one. So my mom was sick very ill for the majority of my childhood. She had lupus, and I think a lot of the formative experiences that you might hope for, like going to a play or being present at PTA functions or things of that nature, weren't really a part of my experience growing up, because my mom was always bedridden and or often bedridden, and just that was difficult to deal with. And then being in and out of the hospital and constantly going back and forth to the hospital when she would have flare-ups and things of that nature. That said, when my mom passed, I'd say that it's like having your heart ripped out. Like having your heart ripped out. And at that time, there were so many things that had to be done that I think you go into, it can be fight or flight in many regards, but I think my sisters, my family, they were in despair, but at the end of the day, someone has to arrange the funeral. Someone has to make sure that the preparations are there and that she's going to be properly remembered and that there's an article in the newspaper, and someone has to take care of those logistics. Someone has to make sure that her wishes have been executed. And so I think I very much found myself in that position with my father to be, if you will, the rock in the time of difficulty. And so I'll say soon after my mom passed, I was going through a lot of transitions because I had just received the opportunity to open a school. I was about to move across the country. I was having my son. And so actually I didn't really have much of an opportunity to grieve my mom soon after, because I was going through so many life changes, you know, and they talk about there are 10 major life changes, and you know, one of them's having a child, one's moving to a new city, another starting a new job, losing a loved one like a parent is another. And I was going through all of them within months of each other. And so in some ways that didn't allow me to process it, but years later, interestingly, I did. And I think to that point, when I look back on it, being able to be a rock and be strong for your family, and knowing in my heart that I had done everything that I could do and that she knew that I loved her, is what is really powerful. And so that's what I have to say.
Yeah, it's good, man. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I know it was a huge, you know, just like a challenging time period in your life that you had to navigate. And I remember you going through it, and, you know, the ebbs and flows of like her being okay, and then going through seasons where it was like really tough and challenging. And at that same time period, you were really navigating like a super busy just life, you know, in a time frame where I was like, man, I wonder, you know, how Dave is really doing. And even checking in, like you were, again, we joked about Super Dave, but you were always super headstrong. And I think you continue to stay in prayer and, you know, following Christ. Can you share a little bit more just about like that journey? Like how did you remain faithful, I think, in your walk with God, and in that journey when you were navigating just those, you know, treacherous waters?
I'd say actually my mom is the one who really helped me to grow in my faith with God. And so to that point, because I had faith in him and she helped me to have faith in him, I think so many of the difficulties of navigating her being in and out of the hospital, and also navigating the demands of trying to maintain your career and be successful in that regard. And even one of the things was buying a house, because we were living in an apartment at that time, and I thought that buying a house and having my mom and my family live there would be a better bet, and that was another major hurdle. I think that what I've learned is very similarly to Moses and the Israelites when they went to Egypt, that we all go into the wilderness, and in life we're going to go through many tests. Just like the Israelites went into test, and they were tested with no food in the wilderness, and God gave them manna. They were tested with no water, and it's really about, and what faith is just, what does your attitude look like when you can't see the solution? You don't know what's at the end, right? And do you trust that God is with you? Do you trust, or do you go into negativity and complaining? And I think there's some element of both of those in all of us. And we have the choice. And I think that's really what faith is that you trust that God is good, that he's going to show up, and you put your faith in him, even though you don't see the solution and you don't know. And I've seen time and time again that when you do that and when you wait on him, he shows up. And he certainly has in my life. And I think that's what has really allowed me to keep going through those challenges and with several others. And I could tell you so many stories where it is impossible, but God shows up and makes it happen.
Man, that's amazing, Dave. Super powerful. I appreciate you just sharing that in general, and your stance on that. What advice would you give to somebody that's navigating, dealing with a sick parent at home?
One is, I'd say the first is, you have to take care of yourself. And I had a mentor tell me, on a plane, they tell you, put the mask on yourself before you put it on anyone else. And I think that that's so true, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone else. And it is very easy, especially when you're dealing with someone who is chronically ill or, God forbid, terminally ill. It's very easy to grind yourself down so that you're no longer useful to the people around you. And so in order to mitigate that, I think you have to take care of yourself. And I think people are really three things. We're a body. You got to take care of your body. Are you working out? Are you eating right? You've got to take care of your mind. Are you learning and exposing yourself to new ideas and concepts? And then you're also a spirit. And how are you feeding your spirit? Are you listening to sermons? Are you reading the word? Are you nourishing your spirit? And I think finding ways where you can do that. For me, it's reading the word in the morning. Just whether it's Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, but finding some wisdom that I can hold on to, praying before I start my day, staying on a workout regimen, and something that I can maintain, even if it's just 30 minutes, but doing that at least 2 or 3 times a week, and then eating right. And I think maintaining those 3 things, at least getting some core habits that nourish your mind, body, and soul, I think over time translates to you being able to take care of yourself, so that then you can be in a place to take care of your others. And so I'd say focus on taking care of yourself first in those 3 domains, so that you have the wherewithal to withstand the difficulties that are invariably going to come when you're taking care of other people.
Yeah, it's good, man. It's funny because you and I in our one-on-ones, or being able to spend time, I think we both are on the same page when it comes to just like physical fitness and health during the season of our lives. So you inspire me, man, because you continue to stay disciplined even now. Like, how long have you been practicing jiu-jitsu at this point, right? Like, you picked that up in your 30s, and now you've been doing it for how long?
2 years.
And you're just locked in, man. And what's your end goal there?
I think ideally to get my black belt at some point, but that's going to be a long journey. I'm only 2 years in or so, but we'll get there.
Yeah, for sure. I know you will, because you're disciplined, man. So it's inspiring. And I'd be lying if I didn't say it continues to stay in my head, where I'm like, I should be doing this. I should be doing this. I should be doing this. But it's, like, let me not make an excuse. I was going to say just the busyness of life and navigating 2 kids and career. But I'll find time, man, and I'll pick your brain and I'll ask more questions revolving around it. But let's pivot more towards really just how you balance fatherhood. So my next question is, what would you say if you could advise young men of color about balancing fatherhood, professional aspirations, and then also personal challenges? Like, what would be your advice?
I'd say be intentional with your time.
Mm,
And there's so many resources that we have, but the one that we never get back is time.
yeah.
And so being intentional with the resource that you'll never get back is of great importance. And I think that means being very reflective about what is important to you this year, this quarter, this week. And I try to set goals, even with my son, about what is it that I want to be true for him this year?
Mm,
What is it that I want to be true by the end of this month? And what do I want to be true for this week? One of the things I've been very happy with, this year, we've gone through a couple different milestones. And I'll just kind of show you how this plays out. But, he was struggling with his reading level. So at the end of third grade, and this was so painful for me as an educator, because I'm supposed to be an educator and he's reading below grade level, and that is humble pie to the nth degree. And so the teacher, she gave us some advice, his mom and I, with regard to, how to help him, so on and so forth. And to this point of faith, right, I prayed because I was completely bewildered as to how my son, when I'm supposed to be educating and helping students get to grade level, could possibly be reading below grade level. And one of the things I started doing with him is every night reading Proverbs. And we read a couple verses of Proverbs every night. And that has paid off so many dividends, because the complexity of the word choice, the complexity of the concepts, and just the wisdom in the conversations that we have are so rich. And so I'm really happy to say that we've been doing that for a year, and he's reading above grade level now, and we've had so many meaningful conversations that are valuable. I also set goals for him. Besides that, so we read Proverbs every night. After Proverbs, we're going to do Ecclesiastes and get wisdom, right? And it talks about the importance of getting wisdom. And that was something foundationally that I found important even at a young age. He's in fourth grade, 9 years old, to lay for my son. But besides that, because I think if you have wisdom, that sets you up for such a valuable foundation in life, beyond just your reading level, so on and so forth. But beyond that, I set goals for him. So this year it was riding a bike. And so he actually learned how to do that in one day.
yeah.
but there's so many other virtues to it. And then he's been helping me garden. And so I started gardening this year, and he's my little helper. And so, we've gotten figs off the tree this year. But I think it's about doing things together, setting goals, and then achieving those milestones. And when you achieve those milestones, that's what makes meaning in life. And so I think being intentional with your time and having those goals and achieving them together is what really brings fulfillment.
That's good, man. And yeah, of course, little Dave made a learn how to ride his bike in a day. That's amazing, man. But you touched on career a little bit, so I do want to pivot and talk a little bit more about your career. And you've been an educator now 15 years, going on 15 years. I guess we came out of school in 2010, not to age us, but how did you lean and land in that direction? Because I know there was a time period where you were dabbling in studying for the LSAT, law, right? Potentially, B school. And then it's no, man, this is I've always felt like this was your calling personally. But again, I don't dictate that. God does, and David does. How did you land on really just starting in education and then continuing to remain in education?
I'd say that education has been one of the transformative factors in my life. And I always knew that I wanted to have an impact. I was doing community service at Morehouse, and through that fellowship, I told you, the W. Du Bois Society, they were really pushing you to excel in education. And that made me look, once I was at Morehouse, when I started doing mentoring, at how well students in the surrounding community were doing, and it was abysmal. And that really pricked my conscience as to, wow, this is the thing that changes your life. Having a quality education gives you the opportunity to be able to change social classes and to be able to earn a living that will change your life. And after going into my senior year, I thought, I was sure I was going to be a lawyer. I was, like you said, studying for the LSAT. At the same time, I'd applied to Teach for America. I got accepted to Teach for America, and it's interesting just how God sets up situations in your life. My family at that time was having some real financial struggles. And we had actually gotten to a point where we were getting evicted, and someone had to earn a living for the household. And that had to happen imminently. And I could go to law school, or I could teach. And that I was already torn between the two, but the ability to earn a living and be able to provide for my family and help through a hard time, that was a real deciding factor. So I landed on that. And then once I actually got into teaching and went into the program, I got bit by the bug and never left. It's as simple as that. But I think those little crossroads, right, where you could go one direction or another, they've happened many times in my life, and I think in all of our lives. And I will say I'm so grateful that I made that choice and that I've stayed in that pathway.
Yeah, man. I mean, selfishly, I'm grateful that you have as well. I think you have not only helped me, but you've helped so many of our friends and families, just like navigating the educational system, as a parent. And I'm somebody that I don't come from anything. And I think for me, it's like, now I've worked really hard in my career along with my wife, India, and like, yeah, we have resources to be able to figure out some of this stuff, but like, resources don't get the job done. Like, it's not super efficient. I mean, you can look at every school, and I'm also the person that like goes back and forth where I'm like, should I be spending this amount of money on like private school, or like should my kids be in public school or charter school, etc. That really just brings me to my next question, Dave. Like, as you know, navigating the educational system can be super difficult for parents, and I'm personally a product of the public school environment, and my wife is also a product of public and a little bit of private school. What advice would you give to parents trying to figure out what to do with their child regarding just early childhood education?
Wow. That's a loaded one.
Yeah.
I'd say a few things. If you have the fortune of being in a two-parent household, the first year or two of the child's life, the more time this parents can spend with the child, the literature is very clear that is so advantageous. I think also ideally, breastfeeding, it might sound small, but it really has so many long-term impacts, both physically and social-emotionally, for children. The first 5 years of life, if you can get those right, have such a big impact. Booker T. Washington has a great quote where he says, "It's easier to build whole children than to repair broken men." There's so much wisdom in that quote. And I think really, if you can get the first 5 years of life right, social, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you've done so much to set your child up on the right trajectory. So I think some of those formative experiences are really having parents who are not so stressed out that they can be attentive those first couple years of life. Breastfeeding is very essential as a milestone. I'd say other keystone things that you can do to set your child up. I'd say, to the extent possible, being able to look for schools early. So I think the difficulty and complexity of getting your child into a pre-K or a TK is something that you've just gone through, that I've gone through. And I'd say, really, when your child's 2.5 years old, you should start looking for where do you want your child to go to school. Because the school that you're zoned for may not be the school that is of the choice that you want. And there are a ton of options out there. You could go private. If you can't afford that, you could also go public. There are good public schools. You could also go charter. So there are a plethora of options, but those options also might entail you being on a wait list if you go down a free route. And so that's why you need to know, do I need to apply? Do I need to fill out an application? How soon do I need to do it? Because if you wait to the last minute, you may be at the tail end, or you may not get the result that you want. Also, going and touring any school that you want your child to go to is paramount. Taking the day off work and seeing does this school treat the children here the way I would want my child to be treated. And taking the day off or a couple of days off to go and see and sit in for a couple hours and really observe that is the question. And I think when you're talking early childhood, I would have more advice as they mature, but when you're talking early childhood, I think the real question is, do they treat my child, or do they treat the children here the same way I would want my children to be treated? And if you're asking that question and you can check the question off yes, then I think that's a viable option, no matter whether it's private, charter, or public.
Yeah, that's good, man. Really good. So just going a little bit deeper on that question is, if a family may not be able to afford, private school, and then they also feel like they're not zoned to the best school for their needs, what direction would you push them in?
If the public school they're zoned for isn't necessarily what they would want, then I think there are a couple options, and it depends on where you're at. So you have to do the research to know this, which is why it's so important at 2 years old, when your child hits 2, you're really starting to evaluate this, because there's no one answer. It's going to depend on where you live, what county, what state. But there are a couple key ones that are pretty consistent. The first is, you may be able to apply for rezoning, saying to the district. So let's say it's Atlanta Public Schools, for instance. You may be able to say, hey, yes, my child is zoned for this zip code for this school, but I'd actually like for them to be allowed to attend to a school in Atlanta Public Schools for another zip code. That's one possibility. And in some districts, they allow for that so that you could go to another public school for free. That might be a little bit further, but might meet your needs. Another option is you could look for the charter schools in your area. Those would be free, but those can fill up quickly. So the way charter schools work is that, let's say, just for an incoming class, let's say it's kindergarten, they might have 50 seats. If they have 51 applications, then they hold a lottery, which is completely random, and 50 of those students apply, they get in, and then one student goes on the wait list. But if it's 100 students that apply, then only half of those students are getting in for those 50 seats, and the rest go on the wait list. So it's important to understand that process, to apply early. And then there are certain things that you can do to guarantee enrollment. So, for example, for the school that I started, for the founding parents, if they volunteered, if they helped recruit other families, they got a guaranteed admission spot. So there's different things that you could do like that. The third option are vouchers. So you can get vouchers from some states, like in Alabama, you can get a voucher for $10,000 a year that they would pay in from state taxes for you to go to public school. You could use that $10,000 voucher for a private school or for another school. So I'd say your three main options, and even your fourth is you can apply to private schools, and sometimes they have partial or full scholarships for you. So if you have a student that is exceptional at the piano or things like that, you can get a full scholarship for that. Or sometimes they just have scholarships that are available that could make the cost of private school more affordable. So just to summarize that again, because it can get complicated, I'd say you could, if you don't like the school that you're zoned for, you could apply for rezoning in your district. You could apply to charter school, do that early, see if there are things that could guarantee you admission so that you don't have to go on the wait list. Or you could also apply for a voucher, depending on the state that you're at, and use that voucher towards the cost of tuition towards another school. Or you could apply for a scholarship at a private school. That's great. Those are your main routes and options.
Super helpful. And honestly, I didn't know about two of those myself. So thank you for sharing that, Dave. And just a few more quick questions for you. What outside of school should parents focus on to help ensure that their kids are developing appropriately and learning the essential skills, that correlate to life?
The first I'd say is be present with your child. Be present with your child. You have a limited amount of time with them. When you're there, turn off the TV, turn off the distractions, the iPad, so on and so forth. Turn off your phone and spend quality time with them. That might sound trite. I'm not even going to talk about reading. Children are desirous of our time and attention. And that is worth its weight in gold, especially in the formative years that I was talking about earlier. And so being present and engaged with them, I'd say, is the first thing, because there's a huge correlation with that and them feeling loved. The second thing that I'd say, if you've spent quality time with them, and you figured that out, when I say quality time, it doesn't have to be that you're spending all day with them. But 45 minutes, an hour and a half that you've blocked into your day where you are my person, you're my area of focus, and that's what I'm doing. The second thing I'd say is play with them. Rough and tumble play, picking him up. I pick up my son, throw him around. He beats me up. But that really matters. That really, really matters, and it's so good psychologically for them. Don't be afraid to have rough and tumble play. I'd also say reading is fundamental. If there's only one thing that you could really focus on, it would be, if there's only one thing that you could focus on in terms of academic skills before they go to school, it would be establishing a strong foundation for reading so that they know their letters. Maybe they've started to string together the sounds and phonetically how those things work, but really emphasizing reading and then continuing even once they're in school. It's not just the teacher's job. You have to reinforce that. You just heard me say, with my son who was struggling with reading, we started reading Proverbs, and we went really slowly at first because we could only get through one verse. It took a long time, but now we're getting through several verses. But and really encouraging the small bright spots and wins that you get. If they're struggling with getting phonetics down, as soon as they get it, you make a huge deal out of it. Oh my goodness, you did that! That's because they'll feed off of that, and the more that they feed off of that, it becomes a virtuous cycle where they want to start reading. And the more you get excited about it, they'll feed off of it, and it's infectious. Putting them in a sport or activity of some sort. For my son, I had him in a little soccer camp since he was 1.5.
Yeah. Yep.
And, it was just put your foot on the ball, but that's translated into him being, on a soccer team and a leader on a soccer team, but getting them involved in a sport. And a lot of this, I think, comes back to what I was saying. If you can focus just like you focus on yourself in terms of mind, body, and spirit, you're focusing very similarly on your child, mind, body, and spirit. So the rough and tumble play is a lot of the body and getting them in a sport. The mind, obviously focusing on getting them reading or as literate as possible, and then continuing that on and supplementing whatever's happening at school and talking to the teachers. Go to the parent-teacher conference, be engaged. But how can I help the teacher? The question should be, how can I support what you're doing? Because you're actually your child's first teacher. You're your child's first teacher.
Yeah.
And so once they start their educational journey, you're going to continue to be that. And you should see yourself as that. And then I think spiritually, I think it's having that quality time and then instilling the morals that you want. For me, the morals come from reading Proverbs with my son. But what life lessons, and really think through, what life lessons and values do I want to impart? And how do I do that? And not just in what I say, but in what I do. Yeah,
that's good, man. I appreciate that, Dave. And you hit on so many things that I think are insightful. And honestly, things that I feel like Indy and I are very proud that we do. But a lot of this stuff is like, you're kind of going in the dark and you're like, we're throwing darts at a board, but it feels right. Like reading to our daughter, Tatum, every single night, and our son, Benjamin, every single night, right? Like encouraging her to continue to sound out the words and string the words together and like reading the book and being super excited, celebrating the small wins that you said as well. And sometimes you feel like, like, am I going crazy or is this like overkill? It's like, no, it's not, because now the more and more that she's reading and like, I'll have a shirt on and she's sounding out and she gets the word, or she's done sounding out, she just knows the word. Boy, does that feel amazing. So I'm glad that you shared that, because I think the more that parents are able to be proactive, with a lot of those strategies, I think the better off they'll be able to set their kids, ahead of the curve, which is great, man. So thank you. My last question for you: what do you hope your children will learn from your journey and the sacrifices that you've made within your life?
So I started out saying that I come from this legacy of David Hardin's, kind of the progenitor of my family line, if you will. And each generation, you could see even educationally attain more, because the first one had no schooling. The next one got an elementary school education, then middle school. My dad had a high school education. I was the first one to go to college. And you also see social mobility in each of those generations. And so I think through our family's struggles, each generation has started ahead of the next. And so for my son, I want him to start far ahead of where I started. Another proverb it says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And so my goal is to leave not just an inheritance to my son, but to my son's son. And I think that's on multiple levels. One, obviously, is monetary and leaving an inheritance there. And so another thing I'd say, if you have the resources, I would highly encourage a 529 account. That's a college savings account. You can start it when they're young, but I'd say a good majority of my son's college education will be paid for when he's 18. And if he ends up getting a scholarship, then he can put a down payment on a house and start far ahead of life. And I think that's the goal. But beyond that, what's the inheritance in terms of what are the life lessons that you had to learn and pay for and experience that you can just pass on through wisdom to your children? And I think that's really what I'm looking at is beyond just monetary value, and I want to provide the monetary value. What are the life lessons that the Hardins are going to know that my son is going to be able to pass down as an inheritance to his children through me, that will set them up to be wiser than I was?
Yeah. Hey, man. I just appreciate you more than you know. And I hope you always feel love and admiration, not just from me, but the rest of our line, our friends, our family, our spouses, etc. Because you're a unicorn, man. And the way that you're showing up for the community, for us as, line brothers, for the youth as well, you're challenging us as parents, to be better in the best versions of ourselves. And that is meaningful more than you know. We need more black men like you that are serving in these communities, that are serving as educators, that are challenging the status quo, that when I get complacent and lazy, if I do, you call it out, where you're like, hey man, I wouldn't do that with Tatum. I wouldn't do that with Benjamin. Do more of X, Y, or Z. Because you've earned that. I think you've earned that respect. You've earned, the space and the grace to be able to do so. So I pray that you continuously and always remain your authentic self. And I'm glad that I get to call you a brother. I appreciate you being here today, bro.
Likewise. I appreciate you.
Thanks, man.
And I've got to say this. I think one thing that's really stood out to me in knowing you've been is just how steadfast to your values you are, how passionately you pursue whatever it is that you're going for. And so whether that was your relationship with India and all of the difficulties that you had to overcome to make that work, and then the challenges that you've done with work, and seeing how that's translated to this podcast is inspiring for me. But you're an inspiration to me, and thank you for doing this. And I'll leave with this, just a quick quote. It's from W. Du Bois, and I think it speaks to what we were saying earlier with regard to being effectas lux, or a candle in the dark. And so it's this: to increase an abiding satisfaction for the mass of our people and for all people, someone must sacrifice something of their own happiness. This is a duty only to those that recognize it as a duty. It is silly to tell intelligent human beings, be good and you will be happy. The truth is today, be good, be decent, be honorable and self-sacrificing, and you will not always be happy. You may be desperately unhappy. You may even be crucified, dead, and buried. And on the third day, you'll be just as dead as the first. But with the death of your happiness may easily come increased happiness, satisfaction, and fulfillment for other people, for strangers, unborn babes, uncreated worlds. If this is not sufficient incentive, never try it. Remain hogs.
Man, thank you, Dave. I appreciate the time, bro. You dropped the jewel right there, and I hope that it connects. It just gave me chills, man, because it's powerful. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being who you are and how you show up and serve us, man. I love you.
Love you too, man.
Appreciate it, bro.